The first reading is from Isaiah 55, verses 1 to 5. Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, that you that have no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen so that you may live. I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast sure love for David. See, I have made him a witness to the peoples, a leader and commander for the peoples. See, you shall call nations that you do not know, and nations that do not know you shall run to you because of the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, for he has glorified you.
Many of us probably know the saying to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. I discovered this week that it was actually coined more than 100 years ago by an American humorist and writer named Finley Peter Dunne. And it was a phrase that was written about the role of newspapers and journalism in our society. However, soon after it was coined, it was quickly grabbed up by preachers and theologians and pastors, and they've kind of adopted that phrase often as a guiding principle for their teaching. But it turns out that phrase is also a pretty good job description for what prophets are called to do: to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. Because that is, in many ways, what prophets try to do. They have a twofold role. Prophets are, of course, sent to afflict the comfortable, and usually it turns out that those being afflicted aren't real happy about it. Often it's people who are in power, people who are wealthy, have some sway in the culture and in the world, and those in power don't like being criticized or being afflicted. That's certainly true today, and it was true in the time of the biblical prophets as well. And so that is, in many ways, Isaiah's first job. And in fact, the first 39 chapters of his book, you'll see a lot of afflicting of the comfortable. He's recalling God's people back to their original purpose, reminding them of who they are and what they are called to do. But finally, near the end of this section, the city of Jerusalem is finally destroyed by the Babylonians, and a large portion of the Judeans are sent into exile to join others already there in Babylon. And so the rest of the book of Isaiah, chapters 40 through 66, really turn to the other direction. They are about comforting the afflicted. In fact, this section of Isaiah is often called the book of comfort because he's speaking to people in exile. He's telling them things will not always be this way, that God is about to do a new thing. He's giving them hope in a difficult situation. And so the message in this section of Isaiah is that their exile is about to come to an end after almost 70 years, because the Persian king named Cyrus has defeated the Babylonians. And he is about to give a decree that is going to allow some of the Judeans to return back home to the city of Jerusalem. So there is some hope coming in this section of the book. So in many ways, this chapter 55 is a culmination of this book of comfort. This is the final word as Isaiah is proclaiming it to a people in exile. I'm going to pick up right where Steve left off. I'm going to read chapter 55 here, verses 6 through 15. You're welcome to follow along on the insert. Those of you at home should see it on your screen as well. So let's listen to the rest of this chapter. The prophet continues saying, "Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake their ways and the unrighteous their thoughts. Let them return to the Lord, that he may have mercy on them, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. For as the rain and the snow come down from heaven, and do not return there until they have watered the earth, making it bring forth and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that out of my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose, and succeed in the thing for which I have sent it. For you shall go out in joy and be led back in peace. The mountains and the hills before you shall burst into song, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Instead of the thorn, there shall come up the cypress. Instead of the briar shall come up the myrtle, and it shall be the Lord for a memorial, an everlasting sign that shall not be cut off. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. On this third Sunday of the Advent season, we come in a season of expectation, a season of hope, and especially on this Sunday, a season of joy as we light the pink candle and we heard the choir sing a joyful anthem to us. In many ways, these verses that we hear this morning reflect those same words of expectation and hope and joy. They resound with God's invitation to a people who are in need of hope. The prophet is speaking to people who are weary, people who are thirsty, who are longing for something more, for salvation and a release from their captivity. Because as I said, Isaiah is speaking to a people who are deep in exile. They've been there for decades. These are people who have lost their homes. They have lost even their identity. And perhaps after this long of a time, they have lost their hope. And I think maybe we understand this because while our present circumstances perhaps aren't so dire as the exiles, I think we too also are invited this morning to open our ears and our hearts for this living word that speaks to our world today. As you heard Steve begin the reading this morning, Isaiah begins with a resounding and powerful call. Ho, all those who thirst, come to the waters. We find an all-encompassing invitation here, a promise of fulfillment to all those who hear these words. And please note here that this is not just some kind of polite suggestion that the prophet is making. This is an urgent and vital call to his people. The Hebrew word that we translate there as the word ho is an exclamation. It is a word that calls attention to the people. It is supposed to grab our attention so we hear what the prophet is saying in the midst of so many voices speaking in the marketplace. And we know too who is invited in this urgent call. It is not just the few and the powerful and the wealthy, but it is all who thirst. And that means it includes all of us, because we all thirst for something in life. We thirst for purpose. We thirst for love. We thirst for justice in the world. And in our own present time, perhaps we thirst for peace in the midst of a world filled with conflict. We thirst for unity in a fractured political world. And we thirst for hope in the face of despair in our own time of darkness. And so this is an invitation that goes out to everyone who is in earshot, anyone who is willing to listen. And then notice what happens next, the next invitation. It says, you that have no money, come buy and eat. And in many ways, that invitation defies logic, because how can you possibly buy food to eat if you have no money? And yet God here is offering nourishment and satisfaction and even life itself free of charge, that you don't have to pay or somehow earn this gift. And so what we find here, I think, is an image of what the world that God desires it to be. God is not desiring a place where we have a dog-eat-dog world where we fight over scarce resources. God's desire is not for inequity and injustice in those who are suffering and starving. But rather, this is a vision of God's abundance and God's grace and God's mercy. It is a place of welcome and of peace. It is a kingdom that we as Christians see Jesus proclaiming the same kind of thing in his life and ministry. Come and eat. Come and be nourished. In the first 7 verses of this chapter, there are 12 imperative verbs in the Hebrew. 12 commands. There are words like come and buy and eat. Words like listen and hear, seek and call. And in these imperatives, in these commands, the prophet is speaking to the people's hopes and desires. He says, if you are thirsty, come and drink from the waters that I offer. If you are a long way off, please come back home where you are welcomed. If you have no money, don't worry. The food offered is free. You do not have to pay for it. If you're dispirited, come so that your soul may live. If you're feeling like you're in the darkness and blind, come and see by the light of the kingdom. If you are lost, seek your way home, for God desires you. And if you are alone, come and join in the company and community gathered here. And just imagine for a people who have been in exile for more than 60 years, a people who have limited choice on what they can do, whose freedoms have been curtailed there in the foreign nation. These commands are not burdens to them, but they are a gracious gift that God is giving them. It's giving them the opportunity to act, to move forward, to make a choice, to do something in the midst of their exile and their despair. They can respond to God's call, the prophet says. He's reminding them that God's arms are wide open. And so he's saying, come here, for you belong in this place and in this time. In many ways, this story of this feast, of this offering of food and water of life, I think calls to mind a story that Jesus told in Luke's gospel. Do you remember there was a rich man who planned a lavish banquet, and he invited all of his closest friends, all the important people in the city and in the town were invited to come. But you remember what happened? They were all too busy. They all made their excuses. They had things to attend to, other business to take care of. And in many ways, that is what the first part of Isaiah is like, that story. A warning to the people of what they are missing when they ignore God's invitation. But the story continues. Do you remember what the host did? After he had been turned down by all the VIPs and all the important people in town, all those on the original guest list would not come to his banquet. He turns to his servant, who we might see here as the prophet Isaiah. And he says, well then, go out and search all of the alleys, go to the train stations and the bus depots, go to the homeless shelters, go to the domestic crisis centers, go to the immigrant detention centers. Find all those who no one else has invited, and he says, compel them to come to this lavish banquet. Come to the place where you belong. Come to the place where you can be nourished and fed. And I think that's the message we're hearing today. A parable of sorts, inviting us all to come and to eat at the lavish banquet. I think this story speaks to us today as well. After all, we often feel powerless as we look around at the challenges that we face across the globe. Perhaps our own personal struggles, perhaps context in which we are living today seems hopeless and despairing. But in this story, God gives us something to do. He says, you can come, you can listen and hear and respond and take that step forward because I am inviting you. But what are we seeking? Well, Isaiah says this, seek the Lord while he can be found. Call upon him while he is near. And so this is not a distant, unapproachable God who is waiting out for the world to happen on its own, but rather this is a God who comes close by, a God who can be found. This is a God who is waiting for us to call. This is a God who perhaps even comes as a vulnerable child to be born in our midst. Let them return to the Lord, the prophet says, that he may have mercy on him, for our God will abundantly pardon. And I think in many ways this is the heart of this story. This is in many ways the gospel proclaimed here in the prophet Isaiah. For God's abundant mercy and pardon are freely given to all who desire it. And as we continue through this Advent season, this season of waiting and preparing, we too look forward to the Christ child coming into our midst, bringing pardon and mercy and the gift of peace. The third verse in our opening hymn this morning, I think, summed it up well. It said, Redeemer, come, I open wide my heart to thee. Here, Lord, abide. Let me thy inner presence feel, the hymn writer says, thy grace and love in me reveal. And so this is an invitation to us as well, that if we are thirsty, we are invited to come and drink. If we feel far away and abandoned, we are called to draw near this day. If we're burdened by the weight of our mistakes and our shortcomings, then mercy and pardon are abundant, the prophet says. If we're disheartened, then the richness of God's presence calls us again and again. And if we are lost and feel alone, the Lord comes and invites us into his company. Our passage this morning concludes with a stunning word of peace and of hope and joy. The prophet says, For you shall go out in joy and be led back in peace. The mountains and the hills before you shall burst into song, and all the trees of the field will clap their hands. And so this is the promise of restoration and renewal that God offers, reflected in all of the created world around us. We can see it even in the world in which we live. And finally, in verse 13, this section concludes, reminding us that God is saying this, I am giving you an everlasting sign which will not be destroyed. That unlike the other things in the world that fall apart and ultimately are destroyed, God's covenant is everlasting. It will comfort us in our deepest afflictions. And so that ancient covenant promise speaks to us today. It says, I am not done telling your story. I'm not done finished with your life, with your family and your friends and your calling in this life. The covenant promise reminds us that God is not done telling the story of this particular church, of our neighborhood and our community, and of our country and of our world. That God is not done inviting us to new and higher things, thoughts beyond our own understanding, wiser than we can possibly conceive. And so that promise calls us into the future, into a newness of our imaginations. And so, friends, as we leave this place today, as we go out back into the world, this invitation goes with us. That we are a people who are called to come, to listen, to seek, to receive, and to be made whole again. And we are also a people who are to extend that invitation to others in our lives. that we are to share that good news, that all are welcome, that all belong, that all can come and eat and drink and find satisfaction in what they need. And so, friends, on this third Sunday of Advent, this Advent of joy, let us recall this invitation and be heartened in our lives. And so to this God of hope, this God who fills us with joy and peace in believing, to this God be all praise and honor and glory this day. Amen.